A few months ago, I went camping with some friends in the Pacific Northwest. I thought it would help me clear my mind after losing a family member. I hadn't camped in years. We found a spot surrounded by tall trees, and I set up my tent. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the air smelled like pine and wet earth. It was a comforting scent, but that comfort wouldn't last. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire. We shared stories and laughed, but something felt off. I heard rustling in the nearby underbrush. I tried to ignore it at first. I figured it was just a raccoon or a deer. Still, the sound nagged at me. It was like a splinter in my mind. The laughter of my friends faded into the background. Over the next few nights, that rustling returned. It became a sort of unwanted company, always just beyond the firelight. Whispers drifted through the trees, low enough that I couldn't make them out. My heart raced when I heard them. I wanted to dismiss it, but I couldn't. It felt real. Each morning brought new signs that something was wrong. Our gear had shifted overnight. A backpack moved a few feet away. A water bottle I left in my tent was on a log. I worried my friends would notice my anxiety, so I kept quiet. I felt the dread creeping in, wrapping around our fun. One night I dreamt of dark shapes moving outside my tent. It was vague and unsettling. I woke up with my heart pounding. I felt like someone was watching me, waiting in the dark. I told myself it was just a dream. I didn't want to tell my friends. I didn't want them to think I was losing it. As the trip dragged on, my grief mixed with fear. Were those whispers real? Were ghosts from my past haunting me? With every unsettling experience, I felt more lost. I kept looking over my shoulder, but the woods were still and quiet. On our last night, we sat by the fire. I heard the rustling again, closer this time. I turned to my friends, but they were busy with their jokes, unaware. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I could feel my heart racing. Then I saw something shift just beyond the trees. It was a dark silhouette, lurking just outside the light. Panic bubbled in my chest. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was my imagination. I forced myself to laugh, to brush it off. But as we started packing up the next morning, I caught a glimpse of that shadow again. It slipped through the trees, just out of reach. I turned to show my friends, but they were already moving. When I looked back, there was nothing there. I never spoke of it with them. They left unchanged, but I couldn't shake that feeling. When we drove away, I felt like I was leaving something behind. A shadow, a whisper, something that would haunt me long after the campsite was empty. When I returned home, I tried to resume my normal life. I waited for the memories of the trip to fade, but they only grew sharper. Every night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the whispers and shadows. I thought I'd left it behind, but those feelings of dread crept back in, refusing to loosen their grip. Weeks passed. I focused on work and friends, putting on a brave face. Yet I couldn't shake the sense that something was still lurking. I found myself avoiding wooded areas during my runs. I kept to the streets, where the lights and sounds of the city felt safer. But even there, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that dark figure. Then one day, I received a message from one of my camping friends. "Hey, remember that trip? You okay? You seemed a bit off." The message stirred something in me. Should I tell her what I experienced? Should I admit I felt like I was being watched? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Instead of replying, I closed my phone and took a deep breath. That night, I decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head. The neighborhood felt different, like it held its own secrets. The wind whispered through the trees, and shadows danced in the moonlight. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in sync with my footsteps. I found myself gravitating toward the open park at the end of the block. As I entered, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The park was empty, save for the flickering lights. I walked along the path, feeling slightly more at ease, until I heard it, a rustling sound nearby. My blood ran cold. I froze, waiting to see what emerged from the brush. Nothing, just silence, save for the rustling again, more distinct this time. I took a step toward the sound. As I did, I noticed something odd about the trees. They seemed to close in on me, as if leaning in to listen. Then I saw it, a shadow darting between the trees on the other side of the park. My breath caught in my throat. This was no mere trick of the light. I hesitated, caught between fear and a strange compulsion to follow. I was tired of running. Maybe this time I'd confront what haunted me. I moved forward, closer to the shadow. My heart raced, but I felt an odd sense of determination. As I stepped off the path and into the grass, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then everything changed. The wind picked up, whipping around me like a warning. I stumbled, caught off guard. When I looked up, my heart dropped. That silhouette was standing still,
just beyond the trees. It was no longer fleeting. It was there, clear as day. It felt like a trap, like the shadows themselves had come alive. I blinked, and in that moment of disbelief, the figure went dark and vanished. But I wasn't alone. The air shifted, heavy with a presence I couldn't see, yet could feel. I turned to leave, but before I could move, I heard the whispers again, clearer, closer. They echoed around me, sending icy fingers down my spine. What did they want? Before I could gather my thoughts, I took off running. The echoes followed, wrapping around me like a shroud of darkness. I had to escape, but I knew I would have to return.
I had to find out what it wanted. I sprinted through the park, my lungs burning and my heart racing. The cold breeze stabbed at my face, reminding me I was out there, alone and exposed. The whispers surged behind me, twisting through the night air, seeping into my mind. I turned once, half expecting to see something chasing me, but the darkness remained still. Just shadows, just silence. I burst onto the street, the harsh glow of the streetlights wrapping around me like a protective barrier. I kept running, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locking it tight behind me. The apartment was familiar, a cocoon of normalcy, but it felt foreign, tainted by what I'd encountered. I paced the small living room, trying to shake off the sense of impending doom. Sleep felt impossible, but I knew I needed to regain my composure. I grabbed my phone, considering messaging my friend. Maybe she could help, or at least distract me. Just as I started typing, the screen flickered and it went black. I cursed under my breath. I plugged it into the charger, frustration bubbling within me. The image of the shadow dug into my thoughts. I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I grabbed my notebook, the one I used for journaling. Flipping through the pages, I found my entry about the camping trip. I read it again, yearning for answers. I had written about the beautiful scenery, the laughter around the campfire, but the shadow at the edge of the woods didn't leave my mind. How could I have brushed it off? A note remained buried amid the pages, a name I'd written down on a whim after the trip. Callum. My fingers traced the letters as a wave of unease washed over me. I remembered the local legends surrounding that name, a tale recounted by one friend around the fire. They spoke of a traveler who could never leave the woods, forever hunting the living to fill the void of his own lost soul. Had I encountered him? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the notion. Legends weren't real. They were just stories meant to scare campers. But why did it feel so tangible? I glanced at the window. Outside, the world seemed still, but an unsettling energy buzzed beneath the calm. Then came the sound, a faint tapping on the glass. I froze and turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The tapping continued, insistent and uneven, like fingernails against the pane. I approached the window cautiously, my breath hitching. Peering through the curtains, I saw a figure in the shadows of the trees just outside my building. Heart racing, I looked closer. It was hard to make out, but something about the outline felt eerily familiar. I could hardly breathe, caught between fear and a strange pull toward the figure. Just then, the tapping stopped. The figure shifted, and for a moment, it felt like it was looking right at me. My instincts screamed to step away, to run back into the safety of my apartment.
But I was frozen, paralyzed by a mix of terror and an undeniable curiosity. That's when I saw it. A glint from the figure's hand, a small object reflecting the light of the moon. In that instant, something deep inside me understood it was not just a casual observation. This was a warning. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. I could sense it. This night was far from over. The silence in my apartment felt heavy as I backed away from the window, my pulse echoing in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was not just a figment of my imagination. I stumbled back to the living room, fighting the urge to grab anything that could serve as a weapon. Then the tap, tap, tap started again, this time more insistent. I whipped around, expecting to see the figure again, but it was gone. I hesitated, thoughts racing. Had it taken a step back into the trees, or was it somewhere closer? I decided to check the door, a tiny act of bravado. I peeked through the peephole, but the corridor outside was empty. Just the dim light flickering from the ceiling fixture, casting eerie shadows. I took a deep breath, finally feeling the sharp edges of fear dulling a bit, even though butterflies churned in my stomach. Maybe I was overreacting. I needed to think. I couldn't ignore the legend anymore. I placed my notebook on the coffee table and opened it to the entry about Callum. As I pored over the words, trying to find clarity, another thought hit me. I had a vague memory of hearing about a few incidents from my friend's camping group that never sat right with me. There had been strange occurrences, odd sounds in the night, and the feeling of being watched.
I jotted down a reminder to ask them for more details. But then a sudden thought shook me. What if those experiences were connected to whatever I had seen? I couldn't just brush this off. The tapping resumed, dragging my attention back. Fear crept back in, coding my thoughts. Should I call someone? What if the thing outside was waiting for me to act? I couldn't stay cooped up in here like a terrified animal. I stepped toward the front door, my mind battling itself. As I reached for the handle, the air thickened, and my instincts kicked in again. There was something off. I pulled my hand back, glancing at the window one more time. My heart dropped. The figure stood there again, positioned just out of the light, holding that glinting object in its hand. It was larger now, with sharp edges that gleamed menacingly in the shadow. I felt a chill spread through me as it seemed to tilt its head, assessing whether I could see it. The tapping grew louder, echoing like a countdown. I needed to act. I grabbed my notebook and pen, fueled by adrenaline. My handwriting trembled as I scribbled down the only question gnawing at my mind. Who are you? I clenched my jaw, despite that sinking feeling.
Holding the notebook up to the window, I managed to turn the light on my phone on and shined it outside, revealing my shaky message. That's when the figure moved. It stepped into the light just enough for me to see. The last remnants of night seemed to stretch taut between us. I swallowed hard as its features began to sharpen. Hollow eyes, a mouth that twisted in ways I never thought possible. Everything within me screamed to lock the door, to hide under the blankets and forget all of this. But as I stood there, exposed, I felt something shift between us, a connection I couldn't explain. And then, from its lips, came a whisper that chilled me to the bone. Help me. In an instant, the weight of the night pressed down again. Suddenly, I needed to know more. My heart raced as the figure's whisper echoed in my mind. Help me. The words felt impossible, heavy like an anchor pulling me down into the depths of my fear. I instinctively took a step back, away from the window, my brain racing through a torrent of emotions. I could feel its hollow eyes boring into me, intense and pleading. What do you want? I breathed out, more a question for myself than anything else. The street outside my window was painted in shadows, but that glinting object it held shimmered as if it had a light of its own. I had to know more. Why had it appeared? What did it mean? Quickly, I rummaged through my notebook, searching for anything that could help me make sense of this. The entry on Callum had contained stories, warnings about venturing too deep into the forest. I flipped back to where I had written down my friend's camping incidents, biting my lip in frustration. There was something there, something that could tie all of this together. But before I could dive deeper, a loud crash came from the kitchen. It sounded like something had fallen, and I froze. My eyes shot back to the window. The figure hadn't moved. It seemed to be watching me as much as I was watching it. I was torn. The inexplicable urge to run warred against the need to understand. I took slow, cautious steps toward the kitchen, my pulse pounding in my ears. I flipped the light switch on, illuminating the room, revealing a mess of pots and pans scattered on the floor. My hand tightened around the edge of the counter. I tried to ignore the unsettling thought that something had compelled them to fall. In that moment, the tapping returned, sharper this time, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the walls of my apartment. My stomach twisted. I was about to call out, but something in the back of my mind stopped me. What if I wasn't alone? I thought of the stories, those rumors about Callum and his dark fate, the campfire tales told in hushed tones. I remembered one story in particular about a missing hiker who was never found. They said if you listened closely at night, you could hear them calling for help, trapped between worlds.
Suddenly, I felt compelled to return to the window, to confront what was out there. I stepped back into the living room, the glow of my phone casting a wavering light. I raised it again, hoping to draw that shadowy figure back into view. And there it was, just as before. But now the glinting object was closer. It was unmistakable now, a blade, sharp and jagged, reflecting my fear back at me. Then I saw something that sent a jolt through my entire body. In its other hand, a small frayed piece of fabric flapped gently in the wind. It was pale and tattered, but I recognized it immediately, part of a camping jacket I'd seen just last summer. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The stories, the letter I had received earlier about the missing hiker, it was all connected. But before I could grasp the reality of what I was seeing, the lights flickered. It was brief, but it felt powerful. In that moment, the figure stepped closer to the window, its whisper escalating to a desperate plea. Help me. I swallowed hard, feeling a new kind of dread settle in my stomach. There was no turning back now, and whatever was happening out there was about to pull me in. My breath caught in my throat as the figure's whisper merged with the silence around me, drowning out every rational thought. Help me.
It was more than a plea, it was a command. I felt paralyzed, caught between fear and a strange, undeniable curiosity. Then a noise broke my focus, a sharp metallic sound ringing from the window, like a blade striking glass. I jumped, instinct and adrenaline igniting a fight or flight response deep within me. I backed away, but as I did, I saw the figure standing resolute, staring directly into my eyes. The connection felt almost magnetic, urging me to come closer. "Help me," the whisper echoed again, somehow louder. Was this figure a victim or a malevolent spirit trying to draw me in? Instinct shouted for me to run, yet there was a curiosity pushing me forward. I took a step, then another. My heart hammered as I reached the window. I steadied myself and peered outside. The night swallowed the world in darkness, but that glint of metal still shone brightly, almost as if it were drawing me in, beckoning me to unravel this mystery. Something tugged at my memory, a fleeting glimpse of a story in my notebook, something I had brushed off as a myth. The kids in my neighborhood used to talk about hikers who strayed too far, lured by the shadows, found later with strange belongings, but somehow changed, missing pieces of themselves, they said. As I ran through the fragmented memories, a chill spread down my spine. The figure lifted the blade slowly, pointing towards something in the distance. It wasn't just a blade. It seemed to have a message inscribed on its handle, rough, scratched letters barely visible. I squinted, willing the words to emerge from the shadows. "Help me find."
Before I could decipher the rest, the lights flickered violently again, and this time they didn't stabilize. My phone's glow barely pierced the growing darkness. A sudden power surge set off a cracking sound, rattling the walls of my apartment as I reached for my phone, searching for clarity amidst the chaos. Just then, I felt a shift behind me, a whisper of air, like a breath brushing against my neck. I spun around, heart racing. There was no one there, only an encroaching darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But the tapping returned, louder, frantic. It was coming from my front door now. My pulse quickened, and I approached cautiously. The tapping turned into a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat that aligned with my own. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Suddenly the sound stopped, and everything grew eerily quiet. In that silence, a chilling realization flooded my mind. I needed to open the door. I needed to know who or what was on the other side. But what if it was worse than what lurked outside my window? Just as my fingers wrapped around the doorknob, a loud crash shattered the stillness from the kitchen again. This time, fear took over completely, and I stumbled backward, managing to breathe out, "Who's there?" I didn't expect an answer, but the darkness seemed to pulse in reply, resonating with an intensity I couldn't understand. And then, like the flicker of a candle about to be extinguished, everything went dark. I jolted awake, my heart racing, the eerie silence of the room closing in around me. The darkness felt thicker, almost suffocating. I blinked, trying to adjust to the void, but all I could sense was the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. My phone's light blinked back to life, illuminating the familiar clutter of my bedroom, yet the tightness in my chest wouldn't let up. The crash from the kitchen echoed in my mind. It had to have been real. I glanced toward the door, half expecting it to burst open with whatever had made that noise. Maybe a fallen pan? A raccoon? I forced myself to breathe. "Get a grip," I muttered under my breath. Slowly, I stepped toward the door, my phone held out like a shield, the light quivering with each cautious movement. The hallway beyond was a chasm of darkness, and I could hear it, the faintest rustling. I swallowed hard. Was that someone rifling through my things? The uncertainty clawed at me. I reached for the doorknob, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. But just as I turned it, another crashing sound rang out, louder than before, and I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. "Okay, that's it," I whispered, trying to convince myself I could handle whatever or whoever was in my kitchen. I steadied my hand and twisted the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a shadow-riddled corridor that led to the kitchen. I hesitated at the threshold, peering into the dim light spilling from the kitchen.
My breath came in quick, shallow bursts as I stepped through. Everything looked normal at first glance. The table was untouched, the chairs in place. But then I noticed something glinting on the floor. I crouched down, the light of my phone illuminating a knife, my knife, sitting next to a toppled chair. It felt wrong, too wrong. I picked it up carefully, scanning the room for signs of a struggle or an intruder. Just as I turned to call out, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the kitchen, chilling me to my core. The air shifted, carrying with it a soft whisper, barely audible, but unmistakably a voice. "Find me."
I locked eyes with my reflection in the dark window, my own wide-eyed fear staring back at me. The figure from before, was it connected? The memories crashed over me in a wave. The voice echoed through the shadows, as if the earlier events weren't just figments of a nightmare, but instead fragments of something much darker. I gripped the knife tightly. "Show yourself," I yelled, a surprising burst of courage cutting through my fear. But the silence grew oppressive again, the only sound my own ragged breath. The whisper faded, but it had left its mark. I was no longer just investigating a noise. I was entangled in something far more sinister. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, something shifting just behind me. I spun around, ready to confront whatever lingered in the darkness. But as my phone illuminated the corner of the room, there was nothing there. Or at least, not nothing. Something was etched into the wall, barely visible in the dim light. I took a cautious step closer, breath held. The letters were rough, jagged, and seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. "Help me find." My heart dropped. I realized I wasn't alone, and this wasn't just about me anymore. The hunt was on. But what would I find? I felt the shadows closing in, a rush of cold air as I prepared myself for whatever came next. The words on the wall lingered in my mind, echoing loudly amidst the silence. "Help me find." What did it mean? My breath quickened again, and I instinctively tightened my grip on the knife. I glanced back toward the kitchen doorway, half expecting a figure to step out of the shadows. The darkness seemed to breathe around me. I forced myself to focus. I needed answers. The letters weren't just a cryptic message. They were a plea. My heart raced as I turned my attention back to the wall. It lacked any further clues, just that unsettling phrase staring back at me. A thud came from deeper within the house, cutting through the tension like a knife. I flinched, but stood my ground. Someone or something was moving around my home. I could feel the panic rising, but I pushed it aside. I had to find out what was happening. With my phone light flickering against the darkness, I slowly moved toward the hallway that connected to the rest of my home. Every small creak of the floor sent chills up my spine.
If I was going to confront whatever was in my house, I needed to be prepared. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. No response came, but the rustling continued. I took a deep breath and rounded the corner into the living room. Everything seemed normal at first glance. My couch was in its usual spot, the television casting shadows against the walls. The air felt off, though, thicker, charged with tension. Then my eyes fell upon the back door. It stood slightly ajar, the cool night air causing it to creak gently. A wave of dread washed over me. Someone had been inside my home. I moved toward the door, heart pounding. My mind raced with thoughts of who it could be. Was it the same entity that whispered to me in the kitchen? Just as I reached the door, I heard a whisper again, this time louder, more urgent. "Find me, before it's too late." My skin prickled as I stepped through the doorframe into the chilling night. I glanced left and right, scanning the darkened yard. That was when I saw it, a glimmer of light flickering in the distance, barely visible, but enough to draw me in. The world around me faded as curiosity overpowered my fear. I stepped off the porch, knife still in hand, and moved toward the light. As I got closer, the glimmer turned into a glow, hovering above the ground a few yards away. My heart raced once more, a mixture of dread and anticipation flooding my senses. This was either a guiding beacon or a trap. Then something shifted behind me again. I whipped around, but the shadows remained still. Only the faint rustle of leaves betrayed any signs of movement. I was being watched. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness, but silence answered back. I turned to face the light again, feeling a pull toward it. As I stepped forward, the glow brightened, revealing an object lying at its source. I squinted, straining against the overwhelming dark as I took a few more cautious steps closer. That's when everything shifted again. My phone's light flickered out, plunging me into near total darkness. Panic surged as I realized I was completely alone. That's when I noticed it was no longer just a glow. The glowing object began to pulse, casting shadows that danced wildly around me. My hands shook as I fumbled in the darkness, feeling my way toward it. But then, a shadow moved swiftly behind me. The coldness gripped my back, and without thinking, I spun around, knife raised, ready for whatever would come next. The shadows enveloped me, making everything seem surreal. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, drowning out every other sound.
I gripped the knife tightly, my knuckles going white. Whoever or whatever was behind me, I couldn't let it catch me off guard. "Show yourself," I shouted again, frustration spilling into my voice. My breath came out in short bursts as I desperately searched the darkness, my eyes darting left and right. I didn't have much time to chase after phantoms.
The pulsing light in front of me continued its eerie dance, like a beacon drawing me closer. I took a hesitant step back toward it, still feeling a chill creeping up my spine. The strange glow flickered in response, as if sensing my approach. Maybe it wasn't a trap after all. But just as I started moving again, a branch snapped sharply behind me. The sound was close, too close. I pivoted quickly, knife held out like a shield, prepared to confront whatever had been trailing me. "Stop!" I yelled, though my voice wavered. I was so tired of the unknown. Ignoring my racing heart, I squinted into the darkness, hoping to catch a glimmer of movement. In that moment, the air shifted. I felt a rush of cold brush against my face, and instinctively I staggered back. I almost lost my balance. Then, the glow intensified. I turned back to the object pulsing gently on the ground and saw that it was a stone, a rough gray rock etched with symbols I couldn't comprehend. Every inch of me wanted to run, but I was drawn to it. Despite the feeling of dread, I reached out. The moment my fingers made contact with its surface, a surge of energy coursed through me, and I felt a sudden sense of urgency, as if the night itself was telling me to act fast. "Find me?" I murmured to myself, realization hitting me. This was the answer I had been searching for, but who or what was the message about? Then a whisper drifted back through the air, clear as day. "Help me before it's too late." A chill raced through me. I had no choice. I needed to figure out what this meant, and fast. I yanked my hand away from the stone, suddenly sure that whatever was pursuing me was growing impatient. With one last glance at the pulsating rock, I turned to face the way I had come. I was acutely aware now of every sound, leaves rustling, branches cracking, and something breathing softly just beyond the trees. My heart raced as I felt a sudden pressure behind me, like someone was leaning in close, whispering something I couldn't quite understand. I didn't stop to listen. I bolted back toward the house, knife in hand, ready for anything that might try to stop me. As I approached the back door, I swore I could hear cries echoing in the wind. I pushed through the threshold, slamming it shut behind me. The nightmare was far from over, but at least I was back in my territory. With shaky hands, I rummaged through my thoughts. I had to find a way to decipher those symbols, and I had to do it quickly. Something was after me, and it wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. As I turned towards my phone for light, I felt another shiver creep up my spine. I wasn't alone anymore. The tension in the air thickened as I turned, instinctively gripping the knife tighter. In the dim glow of my phone, shadows flickered against the walls. I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest, scanning the room for whatever lurked within the gloom. The whispers grew louder, horrible murmurs swirling in the corners of my mind. I could feel the cold trickle of sweat down my back. What was it that wanted me? "Show yourself," I called out, my voice breaking like dry leaves underfoot. For a brief moment, silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then, as if the shadows themselves were eager to respond, they pooled in one corner of the room, gathering into a darker form that seemed to expand and contract like a living entity. I took a shaky breath, ready to defend myself. The faint glow from my phone illuminated the space just enough for me to see the outline of a figure taking shape among the shifting shadows. With each heartbeat, it grew more distinct, taking on features I recognized too well from my trips to the campsite. Hollow eyes stared back at me, shimmering with an eerie glow, a reflection of my own fear. "Help me," came the whisper again, more desperate now, filling the room with a haunting urgency. It felt like the figure was pleading with me, not merely a specter from my nightmares, but a soul trapped between worlds, maybe even the one I had been running from. But a numbing fear clotted me. Who was I to help? My mind raced back to the camping trip. The stories spun around the fire about legendary figures lost to the woods, those that craved life, roaming the shadows in search of a chance to be whole again. Was this Callum? Was this the lost hiker, stuck, unable to move on? I hesitated, caught off guard by the deeper layers of terror. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, but the response was as vague as the figure that prowled just beyond the light. "Find
Me, the voice echoed again, almost like a command. It sent a shiver coursing down my spine. There had to be some way to undo what had been unleashed. I remembered the symbols on the stone, the urgency behind the message. Perhaps they were part of a solution, a key to understanding how to help him or to save myself. I tightened my grip on the knife, a surge of determination overcoming my fear. Maybe confronting my fears, unraveling this mystery, could bring closure, not only for me, but for whatever he had become. "How can I find you?" I implored, desperation creeping into my voice. The figure hesitated, its form shimmering with uncertainty. Suddenly the wind rattled the window, and the shadows twisted around us, as if anticipating my next move. "Follow the light," it whispered, and with that, the figure started to retreat into the darkness, fading away piece by piece, until only its hollow eyes remained, staring into my soul. Then, in a rush, it melted into nothing. The weight of silence slammed down upon me, the oppressive gloom thickening again. The urge to flee surged within me, but I fought against it. I needed answers. I turned, heading back to my notebook. Flipping through the pages, I pored over the symbols I had written, shapes and lines that started to blend, spiraling together in my mind.
As pieces fell into place, a new resolve bloomed. I had to return, to the woods, to confront the shadows that haunted my nights. Something drew me closer, urging me to repeat those words softly to myself as reassurance. Follow the light. I hesitated. There was still uncertainty lingering in me about whether this was a journey toward resolution or a descent into chaos. What if I opened the door only to find out this thing craved more than I was willing to offer? But it was the only path left, confronting whatever darkness awaited me out there. I needed to brave the past to uncover the truth. This shadow, Callum, or whatever it was, had asked for help. I was going to uncover the connection that bound us, even if it meant wandering into the depths of the unknown again. With a deep breath, I made my decision. Tomorrow, I would return to the forest, armed with nothing but my knife, my notebook, and the belief that I could maybe rewrite this story, the haunting whisper repeating in my mind, "Help me." As I settled into bed, exhaustion flooded over me, but the lingering shadows lingered. The dance of possibility and danger still twisted around the edges of my thoughts. I still felt the question hanging in the air. Was this just a supernatural tale, or a consequence of my mind battling grief? I couldn't tell. But one thing remained clear. I was not finished yet. The questions were still there, and until I faced them, those shadows would never truly let me go. I closed my eyes, bracing for the journey ahead, a return trip into the unknown, where perhaps the lines between the supernatural and reality would finally blur, and something essential would emerge from the depths. The night still held its secrets.